The Pentagon says it could opt for a fresh start on the Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure contract. For the Defense Department to get the cloud services it wants, the agency may take a new procurement approach. Joe Jordan is CEO at Actuparo, former administrator of federal procurement policy. It's good to see you, Joe. Thanks for coming on. Is there something different the department could do or should do this time around that it doesn't get bogged down in another two-year protest cycle?
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Francis. I mean, look, I want to be deferential to the civil service and contracting team that spent thousands of hours on this. I understand, like, I wasn't in the room. There are probably a lot of good reasons why they did different things they did. But from the beginning, I've, been curious why they chose to go with a single award contract structure here. I mean, I understand that there's the at least perceived efficiencies and effectiveness improvements by standardizing these cloud environments with one vendor, but you're talking about a 10-year, $10 billion contract. Like, think back to 2011. How far has cloud computing come since then? And we're saying, oh, no, we want the same vendor locked in for the next decade. That never made any sense to me. And I think that's from a practical and technical point of view, from the ability to award this contract without every vendor fighting to the death. I think, it also would be beneficial to maybe look at a multiple award contract and then issue the task orders as appropriate.
Are there mechanisms in place for the department to get what they want through vehicles that already exist? I understand that an application this specialized might not be something you just go buy off a GWAC or something like that, Joe. But is there something to do to streamline this so that it doesn't become a two-year cycle to get the requirements out and then a two-year cycle for protests and all of that?
Absolutely. And of course, you're right that this is, a somewhat specialized environment because it's DoD. But come on, every business I've ever worked at spends some time evaluating, the different options between AWS and Microsoft and, Oracle and IBM Red Hat, and then goes and executes. It doesn't take this long. And, there are already dozens and dozens of DoD clouds and cloud projects out there with a whole host of different vendors. Now, these are supposed to be what's called fit for purpose, kind of specialized cloud environments. But, as we've seen with the Air Force recently, there's no reason they can't be expanded to kind of address this critical unmet need that DoD has because they haven't been able to award this larger general purpose cloud contract.
And that's kind of the theme of the talk that I hear in the community over the last couple of weeks, especially since this advice memo came out from the department, is why don't they just glom onto something that already exists in some form? Maybe it has to be modified or something like that. But there's, as you said, there's already a number of vehicles out there, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely, Francis. But I think, like with everything involving JEDI, the PR and kind of overall brand issues, can get in the way of what's best and fastest to do technically and for the warfighter. I mean, you asked what could they do differently? Well, I don't know. I would have the president, commander-in-chief not tweet that he's going to interfere in the contracting process because he doesn't like the newspaper-owning CEO of one of the bidders. That's another thing. So, yeah, I mean, from a technical and typical contract process, there are plenty of options they have. But they're still going to have this kind of elephant in the room around what's the resolution for JEDI. And I think that memo to Congress from DoD kind of is the first step of them saying, we're probably going to scrap this thing, right? They're saying no matter what the judge decides in round one, it may just be too complex and cumbersome to go forward, so we may just end this.
And that's what I wanted to get your handicapping on next. By the way, I think your observation is correct. It's unlikely that we'll see tweets to that effect moving forward. But what do you think the likelihood is from a procurement perspective that that memo indicates, kind of telegraphs what the department is likely to do?
I would say 75+% that they kind of either scrap or modify to such an extent that it's a distinction without a difference, saying they're scrapping or revising the JEDI contract and just go with other solutions that are easier and not keep on this current path.
What is a reasonable timeline, do you think, for any of these options that we've discussed so far to happen, Joe?
Well, I mean, again, I think because of optics, if not just efficacy, DoD is going to wait to see what this first ruling from the Court of Federal Claims says, and that could be weeks or potentially months away. But in contracting speak, that's relatively soon. And then, I could see, based on that, DoD pretty quickly using it as appropriate cover for, hey, we're moving to a different solution. Maybe they say first, we're going to test in the interim some of these existing cloud environments we already have for expansion or repurposing, and that just turns into the permanent solution. But who knows? Again, why do we need a decade-long contract for this? Technology changes so fast. Let's make sure we have the flexibility to use whatever the best solution is in 3, 5, and 9 years.
You mentioned the four most likely players if this were to start over again, Joe. What would you tell one of those companies if they brought you in to say, how do we handle this moving forward?
Yeah, I think, tensions and everybody's kind of back is up and the emotions are very strong on this. You can see that in some of the, rare language used by both Amazon and Microsoft in press releases around the recent court filings. And that's understandable, right? Like, this is a single award $10 billion contract. People are going to fight to the end on that. I get it. But my advice would be, if it is in fact, hey, we're going in a different direction, DoD is trying something else, then lower the temperature, understand how hard it must be to be in these program and CIO offices within the Pentagon, having worked on this for half a decade only to see it all tossed out, and really volunteer as many non-self-serving solutions as possible, options as possible. And again, I think the more flexible both sides are, the more likely it's going to lead to success. And one other thing is, the vast majority of other cloud contracts within DoD and beyond are done through integrators in a cloud provider agnostic way. And I know that there's a really good rationale for, hey, let's go directly to the cloud vendor. But I wouldn't throw out that as a potential approach as well to kind of get this awarded effectively and quickly.
Joe Jordan, thanks very much as always. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me, Francis.